Okay, so when Eve ate of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, well, and so did Adam, we basically descended into knowledge. Now, whether that was a tribe of woman and a tribe of mankind, or just an individual woman and an individual man, I think is really irrelevant. What seems to be more critical here is that that drug plant, of which there is no chemical like it on Earth, changed our philosophic and probably material DNA structure, so that we no longer lived in a harmony with all things and compassionately towards all things, but we isolated things into separate from us. Anyway, once that had happened, you have tribes in the north, particularly the Aryan tribes, who consumed a Manna muscaria, and when they would eat that, they would urinate out a drug medicine, and basically the most powerful people in the tribe, the warrior class, would then take that bowl of urine and drink that, and they would become intoxicated by it. And then when they urinated, they would give that. I know it's gross, really sick, but you know, people do what they think is necessary, and if you put it in a religious context, they'll even murder. So there is sickness, and that's what we're here to cure. So then the warrior class would then give it to the trader class, and the trader class would say, well, here's a donkey, I'll give you a donkey for that bowl of urine. And so then beneath that would be, say, the servant class, and then there was the untouchables. So you see where I'm going with this. These Aryans came down from the north with all this mental energy. They had wagon wheels and chariots and iron weapons, and they took over India, where psilocybin was still being used. And so basically they set up the caste system. So you have the Brahmin at the top, he's eating the mushrooms, and everybody is under him, the warrior class, and then the trader class, and then the servant class, and finally the untouchables, who weren't allowed to have any, probably because they preferred psilocybin. A smart move on their part, even though the society crushed at them and tried to oppress and destroy them. Okay, so that's the Brahmanic culture. Now we move a little bit to the west, and we come to the mountains of Alamut and I Hussein Sabat. He was the old man of the mountain, and he basically took a combination of opium and hashish, mixed it into food, and he would invite young men up to his house. It's not what you think. He would give them this food, and they would become highly intoxicated. And then he would take them out into a pleasure garden and allow the women that he kept there to seduce him. And he would experience this kind of sexual paradise under the influence of opium and hashish. And when he came down, he would be plopped right back at the table, and it was almost as if it hadn't happened. It was like he had just sort of dreamed it all. And I Hussein Sabat would say, so what happened? And the man would tell him, well, this and this and this and this. And he'd say, I have the power to grant you this. If you only serve me with your life, I will grant you this for eternal life. And people would jump off of tall buildings just by him waving his hand. That's how powerful he was. He was the king of the assassins. So we won't dwell too much on him, although there's a great history there worth knowing, especially for those of you who want to avoid assassination. Alright, so in comes the Knights Templar, the first Crusades. They came all the way from their various parts of the civilized world and tried to take back Jerusalem. And as they did so, they found that they didn't have quite enough funding from the Pope. There wasn't quite enough money there. And so they began to mingle and to associate with various peoples in the desert surrounding Jerusalem, and they found the assassin cult there. And the assassins basically indoctrinated them, or brought them in to the use of the psychedelic hashish and opium. Opium isn't considered a psychedelic by many people, but when you study the way it works, if you take a large amount of opium, it so relaxes the body that the pineal gland releases dimethyltryptamine, and that's what induces the visionary state. that is talked about by laudanum users or opium users, and probably heroin addicts. For example, the reference to "She Talks to Angels," I think that's a Black Crowes song. You wouldn't talk to angels unless you actually were perceiving them. So DMT released by the excessive use of opium, or heavy use of opium. So the Templars used opium, learned about hashish, learned about mind control, telling people things that are not true while they're under the influence of these medicines, and then came back to Europe, like as one gentleman says, Bill Schneblin, they came back like plague rats. They were at that point already worshipping Baphomet, which is the goat-headed deity. I'll show you him here again in a moment.